Why are albums flourishing in the streaming era? Because you would have thought, we did think that when streaming happened and playlists started taking over, that albums would become irrelevant. However, after a period of time when it seemed that that's what was happening, albums are starting to enter another golden age. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's like albums are the thing that people are talking about. Maybe not people who aren't that into music, who just listen to radio, but for people who are into music, albums are like, they're in a golden age at the moment. The artists, it's all about the albums they're making. And artists seem to punctuate their careers with their next album. And people are listening to albums again. Why? It's for two reasons. The first is what works for the fans. I'm not going to talk about what works for the fans right now, because I actually think that the second reason is more of the reason why albums are more than flourishing in the streaming era. It's because of what works for the artists, what works for your process. Because really, what works for both sets of people is an album. It's just a great way for an artist to make lots of music. And also, in terms of the fans that you have as an artist, it's what the fans want. Yeah. And as I said, I'm not going to talk so much about the audience side of it. I'm just going to talk about the artist, because that's what's relevant to us here today. Because I've realized that albums are the ultimate method to finish more music, because definable projects which end at a certain point just works for the human mind. When I started making music, I didn't think about albums at all. I started in 1994 and I made my first album in 2005, so 11 years later. It might even have been 2006, something like that. I've seen both sides of it. The journey of an artist through not making albums, releasing singles, because I was a house, sometimes techno, but mainly house artist of various different kinds, okay? So I made singles. I released single after single after, and I did it for 11 years, and remixes as well. But what I noticed over time was that it was incredibly grindy. I was like, all right, and another one, and another one, and another. And it was almost like there became no point to it. Just repeating myself over and over again, doing the same thing. Because the other thing that an album encourages is it allows you to build your skills. Obviously, by finishing more music, you build specific skills. And with albums, you can focus your growth on a particular area. So, for example, the album that I'm finishing right now is focused on developing my voice, my vocal instrument, relearning to sing, really. That is meaning that my album is a particular thing and not another thing. Okay, so I'm simplifying everything to focusing on that area of growth. And it's all right for me to be able to do that, because I know this is just one album and I'm going to do another one. So it's almost like a contained project that has a clearly defined goal, also the project itself, but also what I am getting out of it as an artist. Another thing that albums allow you to do that are ideal for it are to develop a unique style, because a unique style is an interesting thing. It's a combination of a cohesive thing, but also it doesn't want to be one-dimensional. One of the things that I found when I was releasing singles over and over again for 11 years was, because each thing was a release in itself, I was tending to repeat myself. You would have thought it would be the other way around, right? But when you've got single releases, it's almost like there's a lot of pressure on every release, even one that you're releasing fairly regularly. I, at one point, was releasing a single. It was on vinyl, at least one single every month, if not more than that. Because every single was a release, I felt I had to do the same thing. I was kind of tied to this same thing. In an album, when you're making more tracks, you can start to spread your wings, but it also wants to be cohesive. These are the ideal conditions to develop a unique style. So actually an album encourages experimentation with cohesion. And then finally, what an album is ideal for is making a statement. So think about the difference between a movie and one episode of TV. Yeah, not a season of TV, one episode of TV. I mean, you could say the difference between a season of TV and one episode of TV, because an album's the season, one episode is the single. You can't really say, you can say something, maybe a single word, whereas an album allows you to explore and to say something that is much bigger. And I think this one is why it works for the audience as well. The audience can get involved in the world that you're creating around the album and in the album. So the reasons why albums are the ideal method to turbocharge your process will lead to us understanding how we can simulate these conditions even if you're not making an album. So the first thing is that albums are a clear target that are meaningful to artists. We know what an album is. Many people, they have a goal to make an album when they are a musician. I'm working on my album. I've finished an album. You'll notice people go, oh, you finished an album. They have a weight to them. It's something that we understand. This isn't something that we've made up. This is something that has been in the world for many years. Everyone understands what an album is, and it's almost like a defining thing as an artist. As I said already, each album, if you look at it like this, can focus on a specific area. And this is actually a mistake a lot of people make with albums, is they think about an album as being the be all and end all, the kind of their magnum opus. This is often the case when it's your first album. I would encourage you to think of it not like that. An album is another step. So it can focus on a specific area, and it's big enough for you to develop that area significantly. Whereas if you just do this in singles, you'll get lost in the oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. Whereas when you finish an album, you're working on a specific area, maybe a specific style, a specific way of doing it, a specific story, a specific set of skills. An album also, as we've noticed here, has a start, a middle, and a finish, both in terms of the album itself, but also in terms of the process. So we start with idea generation, then we go to execution, then we go to presentation, where we're actually finishing the process, and we have something that can have smaller milestones along the way. So we've got waypoints along the way which allow us to actually move forward, that keep us motivated, to keep us on track. Because obviously we can set dates for each of those milestones. That means that an album creates the conditions where you're able to consistently move forward. It's all too easy to fall off when you're not making an album. So, oh, it's only a single. Oh, I can just do it another time. The only thing that kept me making singles when I was making singles for that 11 years was the fact that I had a record label and we had a release schedule, and I had other people telling me to do it. I had label partners. I various different labels. At one point I had 2 label partners. Another time I had 1. That was why I was able not to make albums. If you're in this on your own, I'm absolutely sure I wouldn't have been able to keep that up had it not been for these other people who weren't making the music give me a kick up the bum. So if you are not making an album, how do you simulate the same conditions? Well, of course, what you need to do, first of all, is you need to create a defined project. This number of tracks. So you could call it an EP, or you could call it 8 tracks, or you could call it 3 tracks. I wouldn't really say probably 1 track, because again, that's just into the realm of just working on random singles. But it needs to be a clearly defined project over a certain period of time. 3 months is a good amount of time. 4 months, 6 months might be pushing it a bit. I don't know. But we're talking about something beyond a month or two, and a clearly defined project which you focus on specific areas in terms of your skills. What skills do I want to develop by making this project? In terms of your style, what part of my style do I want to investigate or move forward with in this project? Yeah, so for me, I am developing a vocal style through this project at the moment. The next time I might do something else. In fact, I probably will. What story are you telling? What's it about? Yeah, what is the purpose of this thing as well? So focus it on a specific area, because you're going to have another one, which will be in part a reaction against what you have done now. And that is good. Don't think of it as the be all and end all. This is just a waypoint on your way. Break whatever that project is into chunks, into milestones. Okay, for the first month, I'm going to do this. For the second month, I'm going to do that. And for this third month, I'm going to do that. Know what the goal is that you're achieving in each chunk. And then finally, even though it feels not very nice, deadlines, they've got the worst name. Deadlines are lifelines. I think one of the reasons we don't like deadlines is that they're called deadlines, but they're actually lifelines. You will notice that when you get closer to a deadline and you are working towards it, as long as you don't give up, if you're working towards a deadline, you will notice these superpowers appear from nowhere. An ability to focus, an ability to solve problems, an ability to know what's important comes from that deadline. That's why I absolutely recommend that you set deadlines, i.e. lifelines, for every chunk. Because by doing that, by creating a defined project, focusing it on specific areas, breaking it into chunks, and setting deadlines for each of those chunks, you'll get some of the main benefits of making an album without making one. But if you would like to make an album and get all of those benefits and more, the final group of Make an Album with Mike this year is starting next week. We go through a specific process that I've designed to ensure that you make an album. We do it as a group, so you get that community, accountability, and support. Make an Album with Micers are making all kinds of different music: house, techno, drum and bass, trance, singer-songwriter stuff, folk, pop, rock, and everything in between. It's software and hardware agnostic, so you don't have to have a particular type of gear or be in a particular genre. So if you're interested in that, we're starting next week. All you need to do is send me an email to mike@makemusicyourlife.com and I'll send you all the details.